In this lesson, we are going to use the sine law to help us solve triangles. Now on the left side, notice there's a triangle, and it's a right triangle because there's a 90-degree angle right there. Now to solve this, we have been using SOHCAHTOA, meaning trig ratios. So we know how to solve that. Now what happens if you're given a triangle that looks more like this? It's not a right triangle, so how would you even solve that? Now, one method we can use is called the sine law. So anytime you're given a triangle that doesn't have a 90-degree angle, you can use this. But you can use it only when you have been given two angles and a side on a triangle. So let's look at the left triangle. Notice we've been given two angles and one side. So you can use the sine law here. Or when you're given two sides and an opposite angle in a triangle. So let's look at this triangle. We've been given two sides and an opposite angle. How do you know it's opposite? Well, it's opposite to one of the sides. Here is the actual formula for sine law. So sine capital A, sine capital B, sine capital C over A, B, and C. Now, because this is a capital letter, that actually represents an angle. So whenever you're given an angle, we're going to put a sign next to it. Now at the bottom, there's a lowercase a, so that actually represents your side length. Now sometimes people tend to use the equation on the left to find angles because they're on top. And they tend to use the equation on the right to find sides because the sides are on top. But both will actually work for angles or for sides. In this question, we are asked to find two angles and a side to help us solve the full triangle. So I'm going to start out by labeling the side. So across from angle D is my side D, and across from angle F is my side F. Okay, now that I have that, let's write the equation. Because we're dealing with angles D, E, F, I'm going to use that in my equation. So sine angle D over side D and sine angle E over side little e. And last but not least, sine of angle F over side F. Now let's fill in the values. So angle D is just plain angle D, so I'm going to write sine of angle D. And the side across from it is 7, so I'm going to write 7 at the bottom. Okay, next we've got to write sine of angle E, and angle E is just E, so I'm going to write sine angle E. And the side across from it is also just a lowercase e, so I'm going to write a lowercase e at the bottom. And now angle F, well, they've actually given that to us, which is 48 degrees. So we're going to write sine of 48 degrees. All of that over side F, and that little f is equal to 6 meters, so I'm going to write 6 at the bottom. Now that I have my equation, let's try to find an angle. So I'm going to start off with angle D. So that means in the equation, I'm going to have to use this, sine of D over 7. And I'm going to use this, sine of 48 degrees over 6, because both of the numbers are given to us. So let's write that. Sine of D over 7 is equal to sine of 48 degrees over 6. Okay, now that we have that, we are going to cross multiply. So I'm going to do 6 times sine of D on one side, and then 7 times sine of 48 degrees on the other side. Now I want sine of D by itself, so to get rid of that 6, I'm going to divide both sides by 6. So on the left side, those two cancel out. We are left with sine of D is equal to, and then leave this one as it is, sine of 48 degrees over 6. Now, when we are finding angle, we're going to do something a bit different. We're going to write angle D is equal to sine inverse of 7 times sine of 48 degrees divided by 6. Now, you can calculate this whole thing on your calculator, and when you do that, you should get about 60 degrees. So we found angle D. Now, let's find another angle. Let's now find angle E. Okay, so I'm going to write that down here, angle E. Now you can use the sine law, but there's an easier way. If you look at the triangle, we've been given this angle 48 and 60. So you know all three should add up to 180 degrees. So to find angle E, we just subtract the other two from it. So let's write that. 180 degrees minus the 48 degrees minus the 60 degrees will give us angle E. And when we calculate that, it comes to around 72 degrees. So that right there is our angle E. So let's write that down in the triangle, which is 72 degrees. Now last but not least, we need to find side E. So I'm going to write that down right here, side little e. Now looking at the blue equation, we really only need to use this one right here, obviously because it has the e, and we're going to use this one, okay, because it has all the numbers. So let's write that. Sine of angle E, which is 72 degrees, over side E, which we don't know what it is, and then sine of 48 degrees over 6. Now let's cross multiply. So 6 times sine of 72 degrees will go on the left-hand side. And then let's multiply the e with the sine of 48 degrees. Now I want to isolate e, so I want to get rid of the sine of 48 next to it. So I'm going to divide this by sine of 48 degrees. And I'm also going to divide the left-hand side by sine of 48 degrees. Now on the right-hand side, we can cancel those two out, so we are left with just plain e on the right-hand side. And when we calculate sine of 72 degrees divided by sine of 48 degrees, you get about 7.68 meters as your answer. So now we've solved the triangle. In this triangle, we've been given two angles and a side. So we need to find angle A, and we have to find side C and side B. So I'm going to start off by writing my equation with ABC. So I'm going to write side A on top because I need to find more sides. And then side B on top, and then sine of angle B at the bottom. And then side C on top, and sine of angle C at the bottom. Now let's fill in the values. If you notice, side A is across from angle A. So we're going to write 5 on top, and sine of angle A is just going to be sine of angle A. Now side B is just plain B, and angle B happens to be 57 degrees. So I'm going to write sine of 57 degrees. Now side C is just plain C, so I'm going to write plain C on top. And angle C is 61 degrees, so I'm going to write sine of 61 degrees. So here I have my equation. I'm going to start out by finding angle A. So let's write that. Now you can use the sine law to find angle A, but there's an easier method. Remember, in a triangle, all those three angles should add up to 180. So to find angle A, you just got to take 180 and subtract the other two from it. So let's write that. 180 degrees minus 57 degrees minus 61 degrees. So when you calculate all of that together, your angle A should come to about 62 degrees. So let's write that in their triangle. All right, so now let's find a side. And I'm going to start off by finding side C. Now to find side C in our equation, we have to use this one right here. And I'm going to use this one right here because we just figured out angle A is 62 degrees. So let's write that. C over sine of 61 degrees is equal to 5 over sine of angle A, which is 62 degrees. Okay, now that we have the equation, let's cross multiply. So sine of 62 degrees times C on one side equals sine of 61 degrees times 5 on the other side. Now I want to isolate the variable, meaning the C, so I'm going to have to divide this side by sine of 62 degrees, and I'm going to divide the other side also by sine of 62 degrees. Now on the left side, you've got this on top and bottom, so they can cancel each other out, so you're left with C is equal to, and now you can plug this whole thing into your calculator, which comes to about 4.95 centimeters. And don't forget the units. Okay, next I'm going to find side B. Now looking at our equation, I have to use this side right here, B over sine of 57, but I can use this or this side of the equation. Now I'm just going to choose to go for this one, but you could use the other one as well and you would get the same answer. So B over sine of 57 degrees is equal to 5 over sine, well, A is 62 degrees, so I'm going to write that. Okay, now we are going to cross multiply. So sine of 62 degrees times B on one side, and sine of 57 degrees times 5 on the other side. Now I want to isolate my B, so I'm going to get rid of the sine of 62 degrees. So divide both sides by sine of 62 degrees. Now the left-hand side, those two basically cancel each other out, so you're left with B is equal to. Now you can plug this whole thing into your calculator, And when you do that, your answer should be around 4.75 centimeters. And now we've solved the full triangle. In our last question, it says, using the following measurements, determine the measure of CD. Now CD is this line right here. And if you notice, it's part of a 90-degree triangle. So we're going to have to use trig ratios to figure it out. But notice we don't have this line right here. And this line is part of a different triangle, which is not a right angle triangle. Now, because we're given two angles and a side, we're actually going to have to use the sine law to figure this out. Now, one thing I do know is that line right there is actually side A, because it's across from angle A. So let's use that to write the equation. So side A over sine of angle A. Now, we've been given 6 kilometers and angle D. So we're going to write side D over sine of angle D. Now let's fill in the values. So A will leave as it is. Now angle A is 42 degrees, so we're going to write sine of 42 degrees. And side D right here, we know is 6 kilometers, so we're going to write 6 on top. And then we're going to write sine of angle D at the bottom. But wait a minute, we don't have an angle for angle D. But we do know that all of the three angles should add up to 180. So 180 minus 53 degrees minus 42 degrees will give us angle D. And when you do that, it comes to about 85 degrees. So angle D is 85 degrees. Okay, now that we filled out our equation, let's cross multiply. So sine of 85 degrees times A is equal to sine of 42 degrees times 6. Now, I want to isolate A, so I'm going to have to get rid of the sine of 85 degrees. So I'm going to divide both sides by sine of 85 degrees. Now, on the left-hand side, you've got that on top and bottom, so it cancels, and we're left with A. Now, if you plug this whole thing into your calculator, your answer should be about 4.03 kilometers. So let's write that in the triangle. So this line right here is 4.3 kilometers. Okay, now we can get to finding the side CD, and we'll label that as X because we don't know what it is. So our angle of reference is 38 degrees, and this side is opposite, and the side right next to it is the adjacent. Now let's use SOHCAHTOA. So we've been given the opposite and the adjacent side, meaning we're going to have to use tan. So let's write tan, and let's write 38 degrees next to it, is equal to, well, opposite comes first, which is X, and A comes second, which is 4.03. Now we are going to cross multiply. So let's do 4.03 times tan of 38 degrees. And 1 times X is just plain X. So now when you calculate this all together, you should get about 3.15 kilometers as your answer for X. So side CD is 3.15 kilometers.